Thanks, Samantha. Good morning and welcome to this, the second day of our digital forum. I think yesterday I said it was like launching a rocket and we all took a deep breath at our kitchen tables. I think today it's maybe driving the rocket and how that rocket can continue. And along with Irma and particularly Samantha and all of the space team, we're delighted to bring you the second day with a little bit less trepidation than maybe we had yesterday because of the work of all the team in the background. There may be many people on this session who were here yesterday and indeed who may be joining us again this afternoon, and that is the modular nature of these sessions. The usual Zoom housekeeping rules apply. Everybody is on mute, and please feel free, to use the chat. And you might note anybody who wants a closed caption or a captioning option, it's on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. During the sessions, if you want to, coming towards the end of the session, there are three parts to this morning's presentations, or three presentations which make up this morning's session. Do post your question or your name if you want to ask a question coming to the end of each one of those presentations. Towards the end, you will also have the option of going to a breakout room, which is you are randomly assigned to a breakout room to meet with other people who've attended the session. It's entirely optional, but we have heard back from a few people that the randomness, the very randomness of it is in fact its appeal. So before we start today, as I say, just thank you in advance to all of our speakers. And as I said, they have been enormously generous with their time and with their willingness to share their expertise. So for the first part of the presentation, or the first presentation this morning, we're handing you over to Natalie Woolman. Natalie is development producer at the Space, and she'll be talking about the aspects of what to think about in the early stages of a long-form content capture project. Natalie, thank you.
Thanks, Anna. It's great to be here and thanks for hosting such a brilliant event. As Anna said, I'm the development producer at the Space, and I also look after our slate of long-form filmed productions. In 2020, we saw a rapid acceleration towards digital work by both arts organisations and arts audiences. Some of it was successful, some less so, but nevertheless, some key themes emerged that are likely to impact how we plan and make work from now on, even when normality returns. Today, I'm going to speak to you a bit about pre-production for capturing a live performance work, some of the things to think about and questions to ask yourself if you are contemplating that kind of project before you spend any time or money on it. The process should start with some big questions, the first of which is why? Why do you want to capture this piece of work for digital audiences? Perhaps it's to share it with a bigger or more global or more diverse audience, or perhaps it's to make a connection with a very specific audience. Perhaps it's to increase awareness of your brand of work. Perhaps you want to showcase new talent, or perhaps you want to start a conversation or debate online. When you know the why, ask yourself who it's for online. Maybe you want it to appeal to some existing audiences and some new ones, but really think about who they are. Because if you know who they are, you can think about what will work for them and chime with your artistic intentions. Maybe this session is about producing long-form filmed work, but ask yourself if it is a long-form experience that you want to create, or would something short-form or audio only or interactive or mobile first work better for your audience? For example, in yesterday's session, someone mentioned the bandwidth issues in certain parts of rural Ireland. So if audiences from those communities are specifically people that you want to reach with your work, find a form that works for them. Where are you going to put your work online? Think about where your audiences will be. That will help you work out how to connect with them, either for the content itself or with promo materials to direct them to it. Knowing your platform right at the beginning may also dictate the content itself. Different platforms require you to clear different rights and indeed ask for different rights from you as the content creators, which you and your team may or may not be willing to give. And different platforms have different technical specifications, which again may shape the content itself. When will it be seen? Is there a moment, perhaps an event or anniversary that you want to play into with this piece of work? And when will your audience want to watch it? These answers may inform what you choose as your premiere or launch moment, but also how long you want it to be available for, which again will inform the rights that you clear. Getting these questions answered is no mean feat, but keeping the answers at the forefront of your mind will help you to navigate all the creative decisions you'll be asked to make as you work through the how of producing a live capture project. However, there are a couple of particular provocations I want to put forward to you. The first is, how can you make your work more inclusive online? Digital has always offered a chance to make your work more inclusive, whether that's for people who live locally, who aren't willing to come into your venue, people on the other side of the world who are a flight away, or people who can't attend for a host of other reasons, including disabilities, caring responsibilities, cost, and more. Digital means you can reimagine the audience experience so that those audience members who do not feel comfortable in traditional art spaces can come on their own terms. Digital means your content can be global in its reach. Digital means that people with responsibilities or health issues that mean a 7:30 show is tricky can time shift it to a slot that works for them. And you can think about how you want to charge or not online to encourage audiences who may be barred from your venue for reasons of cost. These things were true before the pandemic and they'll be true after it. So I would invite you to think right at the beginning of imagining and planning your project about how you're going to bring in a truly diverse audience and build those things in up front. That might include asking yourself, what can you offer in terms of signing, captioning, or audio description? Can you be creative about them? There are some great examples of imaginative ways to use creative captioning so the text becomes integral to the work itself, and poetic examples of audio description that add to everyone's experience. Do you want to allow people to watch your content in chapters if they are not able to watch a long form stream? What wraparound content can you offer to help audiences navigate through your work and understand it better, especially if they're coming to it for the first time? What's your onboarding process for signing up and arriving to your content? And how can you make it as streamlined, welcoming, and inclusive as possible? With digital, you can curate an audience experience. So really think through what you want that experience to be and how it can work for as many people as possible. My second provocation is a creative challenge. How can you create a sense of atmosphere online? Yesterday, we heard a lot about the unique magic of live performance. And of course, a big part of that is not only the performer's relationship with the audience, but the audience's relationship with one another. And the opportunity we have in an audience to hear someone else laugh or gasp or sob at the same time that we do. I would be the first to say that we have to accept that some audience experiences, pressing to the front of the crowd in a festival or hearing a standing ovation in a theatre, can't be replicated online. And that's fine. They're coming back, we hope. But that's not to say that we haven't already seen some innovative examples of how to create a sense of atmosphere online. Some organisations have tried to give their work an immersive quality. Last year, the film event company Secret Cinema created Secret Sofa, for which they emailed subscribers with costume suggestions, music, food and drink ideas for iconic films ahead of a synchronised watch together moment later in the week. The theatre company Wise Children offered audiences the chance to buy a special chocolate bar along with their online ticket for their musical Romantics Anonymous, so they could eat that along with watching the show. For some audiences, it's about keeping it feeling live and unique and giving the audience that I was there when moment. Andy Serkis live streamed himself reading The Hobbit for 11 hours straight last spring. But when it was over, and the audience who had watched it had genuinely experienced something together. Although, as I said earlier, flexibility on timings is a huge bonus in terms of inclusivity. Other people have recognised that many parts of a positive arts experience often happen off stage. What's the digital equivalent of going to the bar, talking about the show with the people next to you, and those random revelatory conversations you have in the queue to the loos? The Hay Festival had its own in-event chat spooling through its events on the Crowdcast platform last year to try and replicate some of the intellectual buzz that would happen around the live events. Indeed, that's exactly what's happening in the Zoom chat, trying to at least give a flavour of what conversations we might be having in person over coffee and pastry this morning. Others have had great success with watch parties, where an arts company publicises a moment for people to watch together and share their thoughts on social media. So it doesn't have to be complicated, but it's about thinking how you can draw your audience into your event and make them feel invited, seen, and part of a group. Accessibility and atmosphere are two of the big creative challenges we have to take on at the moment in terms of digital work, but they are often things that get left to the very end and bolted on if they're considered at all. So I would invite you to think about them early. And while I'm talking about things to think about early, and just before we hear from Fergus about the Abbey's experience, I have one final upfront question for anyone considering a digital capture. What is your rights position? This is a plea based on a raft of hard-won experience. Please check your rights situation at the beginning of the process. Do you have the rights to film and distribute the work where you want to, not just stage it? Are your creative team and cast cleared for filming and digital distribution in their contracts, or do these need to be renegotiated? Do you know what you're asking them for? Have you explained it to them and thought about how to remunerate them? Can you afford to clear any third-party underlying rights, or are you prepared to change the production to work around those? Music especially can be very complicated, so I would ask you to start early. Do you know what rights you are giving to the digital platform you have chosen, and are you comfortable with this, and does it tally with what you've cleared others for? Often people assume rights will be fine and it's just boring paperwork. Unfortunately, rights are the reason we most often see captured productions run aground, and getting all the permissions you need can be time-consuming and expensive, but even more so if you get it wrong. So those are my thoughts, but that's enough for me. I'm going to hand over to Fergus Hannigan at the Abbey Theatre. Fergus, based on you and the Abbey's experience of 2020, what would you advise people to think about right at the beginning of a capture project?
Thanks, Natalie. That was great, actually. I'm probably going to build on that a lot. Morning, everyone. I see some familiar faces, but also some new ones. So just to introduce myself, I'm Fergus. I'm the marketing manager at the Abbey Theatre. You may have seen some of our work in 2020, but I'm going to give you a presentation on it this morning. So you're going to maybe see some of it again. I'm going to share some slides now, so see what happens there. Can everyone see that? Great. Okay, we're off and running. I would say the most important thing to consider when you're at the start of one of these projects is to go back to your strategy. The things that were important to your projects before are still important now. They still apply. Your values should still apply, and they should guide your decisions. So in 2020, we transitioned from a live in-person program to a blended program, which engaged audiences through free digital broadcasts like Dear Ireland, pay-per-view digital content like Lisa Tierney Keogh's This Beautiful Virtual Village, and live productions for socially distanced audiences like The Great Hunger, which we performed in IMA. So obviously the 12th of March 2020 will go down in a lot of people's memories. For us, it was we were in rehearsals for the production of Brian Friel's Faith Healer, and we found out that we'd have to postpone it, pack up, go home, work from home. And I think to give you like real good advice, I think I'm going to focus in on the free digital projects that we worked on, because they're the long form capture that we have. So the values that we have in the 5-year strategy really helped the Abbey to respond quickly. As I said, we closed on the 12th of March, and 6 weeks later, on the 28th of April, we were presenting the work of 100 artists in a 10-hour digital project over 4 nights, and that was called Dear Ireland. Over those 4 nights, 100,000 people tuned in, and it really set us up for the work that we were going to do for the rest of the year. So to give you a bit of background as to what we were thinking about when we were making that work. So sometimes it's hard to see strategy come to life in projects. It's as you said, it's in the background, but this was really foregrounded by some of the values that we have in our strategy. Dear Ireland was kind of representative of them. So the values which we have are creating, connecting, and challenging. So when we look at what that meant for the project, creating meant that we would make new work. We wouldn't take something from archive, and we'd employ a large number of artists while doing so. So we have 100 artists involved in the first round of Dear Ireland. Connecting meant that we would present the project in an accessible way on an open platform. Challenging meant that we would excite and engage our audiences by having a communal experience. So keeping those in the background, they really helped us make quick decisions as to what we were going to do and when, meaning that we could get something turned around in 6 weeks and be one of the first movers in the space. So our vision helped answer some of the questions, and I think Natalie touched on a lot of these as well, that you might ask yourself at the beginning of a pre-recorded project. So Dear Ireland was a pre-recorded project that we then premiered. It wasn't a live stream. So we decided on the pre-recorded item because we felt that that was going to give us the best results for what we wanted to achieve. Some of the questions we were asking was, what should the audience experience be? That was one of the first ones we wanted. What length will the project be? Well, I mean, that was going to be dictated because we want to employ a lot of artists. So 100 artists means you're going to have, and we're going to give everybody 10 minutes, you're going to have a long form project. What platform will it be on? We already know we want to be open and accessible. That's one of our mantras from when we were in physical production, where we would have offered a free preview for every production that we started off in physical times. Do you want to be live or pre-recorded? Well, pre-recorded was a choice we made based on having 50 different people involved. And at the time, everyone was at home. We had to do a pre-record. We couldn't do it live. What are the design and music requirements? Really, you need to build them in from the start. They need to be decisions made before you go into creating the format. Are you looking to generate revenue or build subscribers? In our case, it was build subscribers. What's your broadcast time going to be? Like, if you know that you're looking at a 3-hour window, we wanted to kind of replicate the physical event. So we went for our usual start time of 7:30. What should be considered in the editing process? I'll touch on that a bit more. And finally, for me in marketing, it was how soon can the final file be ready? That's really one of the main things for me. So just to give you a few examples of how we answered these questions on Dear Ireland. So we used our values to decide things like the platform and watching experience. So for the platform, we knew from our values, we wanted a communal experience, we wanted a way to engage with audiences, and we wanted an open platform. So we chose YouTube premieres. That was the what fitted best for the project. Using the Premiere functionality, it allowed us to generate interest in watching the event as a community. People could set countdown reminders on the video's watch page. They could tune in to watch with the rest of the audience, and we could really push that idea of a start time and an event date. So it felt like a physical production in those terms. In the editing process, we wanted to answer a question there where we want to develop time for conversation between each performance piece. So we developed a 3-minute countdown window between each performance. This would require editing, a bit of thought, and also the commissioning of bespoke licensed music. So you can't have a 3-minute window where it's just silent. We wanted to encourage the audience to use the live chat. So you can't just leave them run by themselves. You need to moderate that. You need to encourage people. So a chat plan was developed for each broadcast. On the first Dear Ireland series, we worked with our community and education team, as well as the communications team. And so for every production now, there's a team in the background on the night that will run the chat. So over the 4 nights of Dear Ireland, we had almost 8,000 live chat comments. So that was a flurry all the time. So it was really, on a given night, we could have maybe 5 people managing the chat. So it's not a one-person job. Then accessibility. So for our audiences, it meant not only an open platform, but ensuring that captions were available through all of our productions. And then on our most recent project, we've gone a step further and made ISL sign language available with Amanda Coogan, who's fantastic. So Dear Ireland was our first digital project, and it kind of laid the bedrock for the ones that would come later on in the year. In 2020, we shared 8 free digital broadcasts. They were viewed by 300,000 people or more, actually. We created, it says 16, but it was closer to 19 hours of video content in the 8 videos. And we grew our subscriber channel, our subscribers on YouTube to 8,400. So when we started at the 12th of March, it was about 1,000. And then to touch on some of the things that Natalie said that you can achieve with digital. So it allows you to reach an international audience. So we're seeing that around 46% of people tuning in are from overseas. And typically on our physical productions, we'd see about an overseas audience of about 15% at the Abbey. So that's just one example of the things that can be done in digital. And looking at more of the accessibility things that we can achieve as well. I'm going to stop sharing there now, but if there's questions, I'm sure there might be, so I'm happy to answer any.
Thank you, Fergus, and thank you, Natalie. Some of the questions are actually being answered in the chat as you were speaking or as they were being posed, and thank you to people who were doing that. One caution from Natalie early on was know what rights you want and make sure they're in place. And I think, Fergus, that would absolutely be the basis of everything that you do. And without igniting a fierce row in this session, everybody in the last few weeks has been aware that IMRO have demanded 10% from streamed performances in the last while from art centres and theatres across the country. And that is a demand that has happened without any consultation with the sector. And without any consultation with people, where certainly the model and the income and ticket income and everything else, that model has changed. I think there's a need for that consultation to happen, and for it to happen very quickly. But it is one example of, a skirmish on rights can actually be a major problem. Is there anything, Natalie, that you would like to add to that from your experience of where things go horribly wrong when rights aren't secured?
I mean, I've got a few horror stories that I won't share, but yeah, things do go wrong with rights, and often, and sometimes it can be as simple as not knowing, not thinking, going through in a forensic way at the beginning what rights you actually have in the show, you actually have in the show. Actually, everyone's forgotten the scene change music because you've been so concerned with the creatives and the contracting the actors that you've forgotten that actually you've got recorded music and you're using the Rolling Stones 3 times. It's kind of, my plea is to sort of sit down at the beginning and work through everything. What do we see on stage? Is there a record sleeve? Is there recorded music? And just plot it all out, and then you can at least assess how big the challenge is. And there are some swaps. If it's scene change music, maybe it can be switched for library music, or maybe you can ask a composer to compose something specially. Obviously, there are some cases where a certain track or a certain artwork, or perhaps even the show has been adapted from something. Some things can't be, got round, or they're absolutely vital to the artistic vision of the piece. And then it's a case of working through the rights holders, working through your budget. But I think at the first, it's sort of doing a bit of housekeeping up front and working out what are the rights you're looking for, and sitting down with a team and going through the script, the stage management notes, everything, to try and get a sort of log of what's in there before you start.
Thanks, Natalie. And I suppose it's a different sort of area, but people are asking as well about making all of that content accessible, whether it's captioning, whether it's signing, and indeed we have a few questions, and people again are, the exchange is happening. There's a concern that there's an additional cost, and it requires more and more resources, so those costs need to be built in, I think, at the early stages of the project, rather than or manage expectations in terms of what's possible, so that budgeting actually takes account of the need to make work as accessible as it should be.
Yeah, Fergus may be able to talk a bit about the Abbey's experience, because it sounds like you, Fergus, that what you offer has kind of evolved over the course of 2020. I think there is, all of these are about, budgets are so tight for this. I completely recognise this. Some people will be able to do some things on some productions and not on others. There's sort of basic subtitling that you can do in quite a straightforward way on YouTube. So there's some low cost solutions that I think are, that people can explore. In terms of being more imaginative, it's sort of to think, everyone's so creative, and all that creativity goes on to what's on stage. And then Magnus is going to speak a bit about the creative decisions you have to make about filming. And what I'm inviting people to think of is how you can be creative in how you approach access to, because although the idea that it's a sort of additional, I'm very aware it's an additional cost, but the idea it's a sort of bolt on at the end is what I'm trying to sort of break free of, and inviting to people think, well, what's the value of this? Well, if it brings in an audience to your work who may have not been able to access your work, then actually maybe there is a bit of space in the budget, or maybe we should free up a bit of space in the budget because the value of that is worthy of it. But there's some very basic technical ways of adding access. But perhaps for some people, especially maybe if it's short form, this is an opportunity to think, well, actually, how can we really build it in an imaginative way so it adds to everyone's experience? I'll post a couple of things in the chat that are good examples of things that have been done, especially around audio description. And there's a really poetic example of a project the Space commissioned, just around a still photograph. I think it really adds to the experience. So I'll post that in and people can have a look at it.
Thanks, Natalie. And just as you mentioned, at this point, we're handing over to Magnus Dennison, who's a producer and cinematographer at Meerkat Films. And after Magnus has taken us through his experiences of producing documentaries, dramas and commercials, and now content, he'll be having a discussion with Clarke, founder of Landmark Productions, and who launched very, very recently Landmark Live, that has brought us a little bit of happiness in all of these days of lockdown in recent weeks. So over to you, Magnus. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to talk to you about, I guess, some of the choices that you're probably going to have to make early on when you embark on a capture or a live stream. As Anna said, I've been involved in all kinds of filming, but I'm really going to focus in on live streaming or pre-recording capturing of theatrical content, because that seems, you know, where the interest is at the moment. And I guess I'm slightly going to miss off the massivest question, which is, are you going to live stream or are you going to pre-record? I'm going to come back to that a bit later. It's too big to kind of deal with right now. I'm going to just jump to assuming that you're going to pre-record and capture your show, which does seem to be the most common way to go. And I'm not going to say that is the way you should go, but you know, that seems to be what most people are asking for. So I guess the question is, how do you make that choice, and why would you make that choice? But we'll deal with that a bit later. So in terms of capturing your show, I think the first thing to consider there is, are you going to run your show live and film it? So the simplest way to record a show would be to get some cameras in the theatre and run the show and film it, and there we go, it's done. And it's multicam, so you can live edit it or you can edit it later, and it's a very easy, potentially quite cheap way of doing it. The problem with that is it can be a little dull to watch. It's a very kind of old-fashioned and dare I say it, kind of boring way to film a show. Therefore, do you want to consider breaking your show up and filming it a little bit more like you would film a feature film, which is usually the camera is constantly moving. So for every scene, even different moments of a scene, the camera is in a different place. Maybe the camera is moving. You know, you might want a camera on the stage. You might want Steadicam, gimbal, spinning around. You know, suddenly there's all the options there. And normally the shows that we capture, it's actually a combination of the two. So we do usually film the show live in a multicam setup, perhaps more than once. And then we go back on another occasion, if we've got the budget, film over multiple days and pick up as many kind of special moments that we can. So just a quick example, I filmed the Christmas show here in Newcastle at Northern Stage recently. They wanted it to be performed live in front of us from beginning to end, so the actors could, you know, get into the flow of it. They didn't want to destruct, you know, the show in that way. However, it was a musical piece, so for the musical numbers, we really wanted to elevate the show. So we filmed the musical numbers additionally with Steadicam and other shots, and it all cuts together. And I think it's a really, really nice compromise way to go. But as Fergus was saying before, all of these choices really should come back to what is your show, and trying to keep true to, you know, the soul of that show. So I imagine that every one of these choices, you know, am I going to live stream it? Am I going to perform it multicam and that's it? Or am I going to break it down into a film, multiple shots and edit it later? Probably, if you really look at your show, then it tells you which one of those approaches is going to be best. Possibly also where it's going and who your audience is as well. It's going to get into that choice as well. Just one little thing before I move on to my next point is about audiences. Like, obviously at the moment you can't have an audience in, but soon you may be able to have an audience, perhaps a small audience, maybe a full audience. And there is this question about whether you should film the show with an audience present. It can really help the kind of feel and the buzz of the filming, but it does make the actual process of filming the show quite difficult. You know, that I could give you 100 examples, but one quick example is like the lighting of the show, for example. Often we go through lighting states and adjust them to work best on camera. As soon as you have an audience there, well, you have to prioritize the experience of that audience in the room. So then you're compromising your filming. So it gets very complicated, but there's a lot to gain from having a live audience, you know, being heard in the background. Okay, I'm going to move on to, and I've only got 10 minutes to talk, so I can't go into a huge amount of detail on, you know, technically how you film, but, you know, just pop some questions in if you want me to go into any more of these things. I was going to talk about cameras, like which cameras and how many cameras you're going to have has such a huge effect on how you want it to feel, like if it's cinematic or, and whether you're going to rehearse and film your show in a multicam kind of coordinated manner with a multicam director that has planned in advance exactly what camera's going to be live and where they're going to be, or if you want to take a more organic process with perhaps fewer cameras and do more in the edit to actually create the content, to actually create the feel of it. Audio, I guess, like Natalie was talking about rights, like my plea to you is don't forget audio. It's possibly the most important factor of capturing a show, I would say, and also it's probably the most challenging. If you've got a show where people are doing costume changes, having lapel mics on, it can be a nightmare. They get dislodged. If you're filming it live all the way through, with cast coming on and off, doing costume changes, you know, you have to have a lapel mic that's going to last from beginning to end without dislodging, and that can be really challenging. If you're breaking it up into smaller sections, you've always got a chance to stop and, you know, adjust the mics. But I've filmed shows where they've just said, no, we can't have lapels, like it just gets in the way of the performance. Or if it's a dance or a movement show, again, it just gets in the way. You can hang mics, you can have PZMs on the stage, you can have shotgun mics. They've all got their pros and cons. I can't tell you the answer, just please put some time in to really work through that problem. In terms of music and SFX, it keeps coming up in my productions. If you're going to film something multiple times and then cut them together and edit, if you've got sound effects coming out of speakers, or if you've got music coming out of speakers, they won't sync up from one take to another, and you can have a complete nightmare in the edit. Possibly it might not even work, and you might have to really commit to only one of your takes. So you know, again, I can't give you the answer. There's 100 different answers, but it's just really thinking all of that through. Can you run your show without sound effects and add them later, or do we have to have in-ear monitors for the cast if it's a movement show so they can hear the music, but we're not recording it out of the speakers, and then it's wonderful in the edit. Lighting, as I said before, things often don't look the same in the camera as they did through the eye. So please consider and be open to adjusting your lighting state to work best through the camera, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it looks odd in the room if you don't have an audience. It's got to look the way you want it to look through the camera, and that may actually be making it look slightly odd in the room, slightly darker or brighter than you would normally have it in order to get the right look in the camera. Certain colors don't work so well, so you may need to adjust the extremity of your lighting setup to work best on film. Grip, which is essentially like equipment for holding and moving the camera. If you do the simplest approach, you've just got tripods, 3 cameras on tripods, and you film your show, you're probably going to be a little bit disappointed. So, you know, what can we do? We can add tracks. You can make a camera kind of track back and forwards. You can have sliders if you're going to be on the stage, which is like a mini track. Steadicam, we did a lot of Steadicam on a show recently. It's a bit old school, but it's a brilliant thing. These days, everyone's using gimbals, which is essentially a modern, cheaper, smaller form of Steadicam. If you don't know what the Steadicam is, it allows you to kind of fly around, you know, very smoothly. So if you're doing some special shots on the stage, you can kind of glide around with the actors. You might even want to film your whole show like that, have have basically another character on stage that moves around constantly. Some films have been made like that. It's magical. Obviously, if it suits your show, you know, it can be just a gimmick, but if it's going to elevate your show in a genuine way, then, you know, I would recommend really thinking about those things. Okay, I'm running out of time. I'm going to shoot ahead. Accessibility we've mentioned before, so I won't go into details. And obviously, you know, the usual options are get captioning, audio description, get a BSL or ISL signed version. Going back to my original point about live or capture, accessibility is a lot easier if it is pre-recorded and captured. You've got time to kind of get these in place. This is being live captioned and I'm speaking 100 miles an hour, so I apologize to Tara there. It's very difficult to live caption BSL. I have done live BSL before where we've had another camera just filming someone BSL signing on stage. It's expensive and really hard. It can be done. It's much easier if it's pre-recorded. Now I'm running out of time. My next bit of talk was about going back to my original question about live streaming or capturing. Anna, do I have time to quickly go through those, or have I used up my 10 minutes? Yeah. So I was writing my pros and cons of live streaming versus capturing, and it's funny, I had the same things were in pros and cons, which is making me curious. So obviously, if you're live streaming a show, it can be extremely exciting for the viewer, exciting for the cast, exciting for everybody. It's an amazing thing to achieve. Everyone's got such a buzz, and that really, I think, comes across. So that's a huge reason to do it. If you can have audience participation, again, I think that's one of the most magical things about live stream. My kids are watching The Voice the other day. I doubt you've watched it, but you know, they've got the audience on Zoom actually on screens, you know, where the audience would actually be. I've never seen that before. It was quite amazing, actually. I mean, you possibly can't do that without huge amounts of money, but there's some really interesting things that we could consider there with audience participation. It's harder with a live show. You know, if you're doing a comedy gig, it kind of makes perfect sense because you can have live heckling and stuff. It's harder with theatre, but I'm sure if we all, you know, really thought we could come up with some amazing things that we could do with audience participation. Also, the buzz of the live continues afterwards, surprisingly. So even though it's been live, it's not live anymore. It was live, and people, I think, really, there's still the excitement there that, oh, they were live. And I think, I mean, Sarah can correct me here, but I reckon you could probably achieve higher viewing numbers with the live because you've got that buzz and it even retains afterwards. So I think there's potential to get higher. It can help on rights, like Anna was saying there. There is this slight overlap with the PRA. I don't know if you have a different system in Ireland, but the, you know, obviously like film rights and performance stage rights are different, but there's a slight overlap with a live stream. However, then you've got to take it down. So I don't know, it just seems like such a shame. So perhaps that's not such a pro. It can be very quick to shoot. Well, it has to be the length of the show, right? So it can be very quick. However, it can take enormous amounts of pre-planning, which can go on forever. It can be cheaper, but also it can be more expensive. And it in a way can be quite forgiving because people know it's live, so they may be a little bit willing to accept. However, it also is very unforgiving because so much can go wrong, and it's often does. And you know, so there's a huge amount of pressure on everybody to get it as tight as you can, and the planning that goes in is insane. So the cons, I've kind of already touched upon a few of those. It's a lot of pressure. And I guess the biggest one really is that you are back to my original point, which is you've got 3 cameras on tripods and that's it. You can't have a Steadicam shot on the stage for the musical numbers for a live stream unless you have a lot of money and a lot of time to prep. I mean, if you watch like The Voice, for example, they probably do have Steadicam on the stage, but the organization and the rehearsal that goes into making a show like that happen, it's just immense. it's possible, but probably not going to happen for the theatrical live stream. So it's going to look more simple. It's going to have errors in it. It's going to have problems, and you can't fix them later. It's very hard to fix them later. So, you know, as a record of that show, it's perhaps not so great. Then if you had pre-recorded it, you can refine it and make something that will last, you know, forever. Okay, I better stop. I've gone way over. So Anne, so you've obviously done this. You know, what approach did you take, and how did it go? And do you agree with what I'm saying, my warnings?
Thanks, Magnus. Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I wish we'd had a chat before I sort of went into this head first. So yeah, so I'm just out the other end of live streaming 2 shows. We came down in favor of the live stream as opposed to the pre-recorded, and that, I suppose, was the decision was made. It was sort of informed by the Old Vic in Camera series, really, who were one of the first people out of the traps last summer, when they started to put their work on stage, to film their work on stage. And they did it really in a really quite lo-fi way, actually, with them, and they chose to do it over Zoom. They did it all in-house. They filmed it in-house with in-house technicians and lighting people. They monetized it, which was what was of interest to me in terms of sustainability, and above all, it was live. And I will never forget sitting down for the first performance of Lungs and hearing the front of house person say, "Please take your seats, the performance will begin in 5 minutes," and getting an absolute rush of excitement, which is something that we then carried through when we did the 2 shows here. And I know from talking to people were actually in tears at the thought of, you know, here we are sharing, we're about to share a theatrical experience in the only way we can do it now. And I do think for me, that sense of liveness, of being alive in the same time, as Tom Murphy said, is a huge part of what makes what we're doing different to making a film or making a television program, or, you know, like, I think in terms of holding on to what makes theatre special, liveness is just really important for me. And of course, you're absolutely right. It's much easier to control the final product and how it looks. And, you know, if you have the time afterwards to edit everything together, to make sure everything as it is, it all matches up. But for me, the sense of a live theatre experience trumped everything. So having made that decision, then we had to figure out how to do it. And Landmark is actually a really small company, but happily Hugh Farrell was working as associate producer on the live stream, and Sinead McPhillips coordinated everything to do with the sort of the marketing and the sort of telling people what we were about in terms of particularly the approach. And so then Hugh did a whole load of research into various platforms, into, you know, streaming platforms, into filming options. And at the end of the day, it was also led by budget, obviously, in that there wasn't a huge amount available. The Arts Council had a really helpful funding scheme called the capacity building scheme, which was part of it was to go towards digital, and that really sort of prompted us to think about how we could do it. The only way, a sort of previous experience I'd had in terms of trying to film a theatre, or in this case an operatic performance, was when we did The Last Hotel with Wide Open Opera, which we made a film of for Sky Arts, which involved a performance capture as well as a couple of days filming, actually, on location. It was a sort of hybrid thing. And so I remembered one of the people that who had been involved in that performance capture. We went down the road with them and eventually partnered with a company called Seismic, who looked after the filming. And you do have to put a huge amount of trust in other people, and that for me as a producer was pretty well, it's quite nerve-wracking, you know, and it is that amount of pressure in a live event. You know, I mean, theatre, producing theatre is pressurized and stressful enough at the best of times. But actually, you know, that first week when we did the approach, and I knew that at, you know, 7:30 on Thursday, people were going to be logging on from all over the world to watch. You know, it's easy to underestimate the amount of pressure involved. Having done it, it's amazing. I'm so delighted we did it. That feeling of real excitement, the feeling of an event, the feeling that people were coming together. People did all the things. They you know, they joined in on the chat. It was wonderful to see, you know, people joining from all over the world. There were people who you know, they had watch parties, you know, like little, you know, sort of family groups, you know, somebody in England, somebody in Ireland, you know, and then they got together afterwards and they discussed it all afterwards. So the whole liveness did actually work. In terms of the filming, sort of actually how we went about doing it. So we did two shows. So we did Marco Rose, The Approach, and Happy Days, and there were different propositions in a way, in that The Approach had been done previously and had been performed up to 50 times by the same cast. So the actors had it in their bones, whereas Happy Days was a brand new production, which, you know, we did a single live stream of without any of the usual things that go along with putting on a new show. You know, we had no dress rehearsal, you know, we had no, you know, we'd never played it to an audience, we had no previews, you know, so it is actually very high stakes. But thankfully we were really fortunate to have really good collaborators, and it all worked, and the work that everybody did was just extraordinary on both shows. So with The Approach, we had we already had, as I say, the actors knew it through and through. We had a really good performance capture anyway, we had done a show archive video with 3 cameras, which had been edited together. So the camera director for broadcast had a template to work off. With Happy Days, we didn't. But again, the one thing that both shows had in common was the fact that they were, you know, there's a limited amount of movement, so don't have camera operators trying to keep up. You know, the biggest challenge was when Willie fell down from the top of the mount and the camera had to track him. Anyway, so we filmed it with fixed cameras, so we had 4 cameras for The Approach and 7 cameras for Happy Days because of the scale of it. We had the same crew for each, so there was a broadcast director, 2 camera operators, a sort of a tech sort of streaming director, a sound engineer, a captions operator, and a producer. And there's no doubt that you know, it certainly made everything easier and Happy Days on the new production, having done The Approach the week before. You know, so what else can I say about the filming? The director, so the broadcast director had, in terms of the amount of prep, you had conversations with the directors of the 2 shows in the weeks coming up to it, was very mindful and very conscious of the fact that his responsibility was to ensure that the theatre directors were happy with the end result, and that he was reflecting their wishes rather than imposing his view of how it should work. There are absolutely challenges in terms of things like lighting and sound, and that everybody needs to work on. You know, there are also creatively things like, so, you know, with Happy Days, for example, in the first act where Winnie is, you know, up to her waist in this mound, in this extraordinary landscape, you know, the camera wants to go in close, and the audience quite often wants to see the actor close, and yet it makes no sense unless we know that Winnie is trapped in this extraordinary situation. So, you know, there was a sense of having to pull back at times and maybe show the wider landscape as you'd see it in the theatre. Just in terms of one of the things some of the things that Natalie talked about earlier, like in terms of the why, you know, all of those things are hugely important in terms of, you know, accessibility, in terms of reaching wider audiences, all of those things. One of the things for me that was really important was to try and find out whether people would pay a reasonable amount to see live theatre online, because obviously in the immediate, you know, when the curtain came down in March, there was a huge amount of online content that was made available free to get everybody through the first lockdown, but that's not sustainable. And if we are going to have to figure out ways of supplementing whatever small audiences we can get in real life over the next while, then we really need, you know, the creation of content is not free. Actors coming together to create work is not free. So that was one of the things I really wanted to test. So we did a range of ticket prices ranging from €15 concession right up to an early bird of 20 to a standard ticket price of €25 and a household and supporter ticket on top of that. And people, we did a survey afterwards, and people, the average ticket price paid was €20, and people, I think it was 62% of people. This is sort of going back to the liveness of it. 62% of people said that the live nature of the event was either very important or extremely important. So I do think there's a premium that people will pay to be part of a live event. So that was encouraging. And certainly, I mean, all sorts of other things, the other benefits, the thing about, you know, connecting with audiences around the world is extraordinary, not just around the world, around the country. You know, people in Donegal or West Cork are not going to get to Dublin to see a show and project. That was really incredibly satisfying. People were, you know, the response we got afterwards, both in the survey, but also in emails in terms of on social media, like people were just incredibly grateful to have had the opportunity to experience work like this. And I think, you know, as producers, we have a responsibility to our company, to, you know, not to our companies, but to the companies of people that we work with, to the artists, to the production people, to try and figure out a way to continue to make work, to try and figure out a way to reach our audiences. And another good thing that has come out of the last couple of weeks is the fact that we made both of these shows at a time when the COVID rates were really high. You know, level 5 restrictions were in full force. We were able to run 2 rehearsal rooms and workshops and subsequently theatre production weeks with complete safety. And now we know that we can do it, and that we will be permitted to do it. So that gives us as producers great comfort in knowing that we can schedule work over the next 6 months or whatever, in, you know, barring whatever, but like in reasonable confidence that we can manage to bring it to the stage. And after a year in which we've all been beset by so much dismantling of work, so much disappointment, so much having to, you know, accept that work isn't going to be made, to know that we have the means and the wherewithal to make this work, I think is a hugely positive thing as we start this new year. So yeah, I suppose just one other thing then, well, 2 other things actually. Just to say that there is obviously, there is, you know, a lot of support in terms of things like the Arts Council we've talked about already. Culture Ireland, for example, supported, they have now, rather than supporting people to get, you know, to travel, to present work in other countries, are now supporting the making and the dissemination of work. So Landmark partnered with St. Anne's Warehouse in New York, where we've done a lot of work over the last few years at the Galway Arts Festival, and they presented the American premiere of The Approach, and that turned out to be a hugely beneficial thing, not just for like in terms of the sort of as much in terms of profile as anything else. So, you know, that gave rise to amazing reviews in the New York Times, the LA Times, and so profile for the actors and for Mark's work that wouldn't have been forthcoming if we hadn't done that. So that's another hugely helpful and supportive avenue. And then the Department of Arts supported the Olympia to present Happy Days through their pilot life support scheme. So I think people know and understand that this whole digital area is hugely important and will remain hugely important. And even when we can get back to presenting work to full houses, and God knows that can't come soon enough, but there will be, you know, this is not a short-term thing. I absolutely think that all the benefits that we've learned over the past while and in doing this will stay. And there's no question that Landmark, for example, will continue to do online streamed digital filmed versions of its work. You know, Landmark Live is absolutely here to stay. So that's me. Happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you so much. You actually answered a question that came up in the chat much earlier, which was, why will we put all this energy into producing content online for online? You know, when we want to return to, you know, live performance and actually people sitting in theatre. So I think your answer echoes very much what was said yesterday. I know there is a lively, or there are a number of lively conversations in the chat. One is about the pressures on budgets to both, you know, make sure that you've secured and paid for all the rights that you should do, and also about ensuring that the work and it's made is accessible. We'll come back to those in the chat, and I will bring people in after the next presentation. But before that, we're going to turn now to Sarah Fortescue, the head of distribution at the space, and who's worked in broadcast and the digital sectors for many years now, along with Dominic Kennedy, who is another distribution associate at the space, who is, in his own words, applying his storytelling skills to creating strategically sound work. They will in turn hand over to, or have a conversation with Diego, Executive Director of Irish National Opera, and a lot of the questions that are in the chat, maybe about distribution, ticketing, and all of those related issues, will be answered in this session. So over to you, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so my name's Sarah and I'm head of distribution at the space. So I focus on distributing work in most contexts, so from online to social media, which we've covered a bit, and TV, cinema, and streaming. There are a lot of options out there for anyone looking to live stream. And today Dom's going to be covering a bit of the example of Cypress Avenue, which was streamed for free online after a BBC broadcast. But please feel free to use the chat about any other methods of distribution if you think that they're more suited to your production, and I'll try and help where I can. So, as you can imagine, last year was a very interesting year, distribution-wise. The first thing was that there was obviously a lot more streaming. Prior to 2020, it was something that we saw organisations trying out, but very much secondary activity. Now it's obviously become essential. It's really the only way of reaching audiences. But the second thing was, you know, how do we monetize that content, which I saw coming up again and again in a much bigger way than it had ever been asked before. So luckily there are some really straightforward ways in which you can combine the two. The first is how you approach your fundraising ask. So in some cases, it's offering pay as you feel over donations. So actually putting a price on it in an informal way, which is something that we saw some success in from some of the companies we work with. And the other way is like how prominently you're going to feature the ask. So instead of a kind of small request buried in the YouTube description or in the copy on Facebook, it's how you embed that in your content at key moments. So if it's a to camera plea from someone from the theatre at the beginning of the film, or even in the interval when you know the audiences are hooked, And of course, we would hope that at the moment audiences are a little more keen to donate and not expect all of that content for free, given the crisis that is affecting the industry. There is a third way, which brings in another method of distribution. So instead of using social media to distribute for free or with a fundraising ask, which is obviously brilliant for numbers, we saw a shift in organizations using pay-per-view platforms, which would either be embedded on the organization's website or by partnering with existing platforms which hosts content from other theatres so that you can bring in new audiences. The guidance for which approach is best to your organisation and your show is totally unique, but I'm just going to run through some questions that I would typically ask an organisation before going ahead and making any specific recommendations. So the first would be, what is your audience reach like? So is this something that you want to do to reach existing audiences, or are you looking to tap into new ones? Do you have or do you need a lot of data? Does this have to be a live stream? Because as brilliant as live streaming is and as exciting as it is, it might limit, it will limit your options. Distribution, as the other speakers have said, is something that needs to be thought about right at the beginning of this process, definitely not at the end. And that goes for picking your platform as well. So some pay-per-view platforms, particularly on the kind of cheaper end, will only allow for pre-recorded content. And I think Magnus and Natalie have already covered it, but there are some positives for pre-recorded use on social media as well. So another question is, do you have a really short window to distribute this in, basically because of rights, or can you enter negotiations with other platforms for hosting it for a long time, which is going to strengthen your case for other distributors picking up the content and sharing it with their audiences? Is this kind of live streaming and monetizing the content something that you're looking to do as a one-off? As a temporary measure, or is this a long-term strategy? So basically, can you afford the initial investment in a pay-per-view platform, or do you need a lower risk approach? And yeah, lastly, which supports what we always say, is can you clear the rights for monetizing it? You know, monetization adds on another layer of rights complications, which you do need to think about at the very beginning and get that into the contracts with your performers and creative team. And before I hand over to Dom, I just wanted to say something quickly about kind of ambitions and expectations, to, you know, because this is really challenging time. So Cypress Avenue, which we'll obviously talk about, had 100,000 views across social platforms and the BBC. Now, we are acutely aware that this was filmed before lockdown. It went out before lockdown. The landscape is now much more crowded. So when you're sitting and planning your potential reach, please go easy on yourselves. The competition online at the moment, and it has been for a while, extremely fierce. So yes, there are more people sitting at home and expecting to see their content like that, but you know, the flip side is there are a lot more companies, artists sharing their work. If you're getting a few thousand views, just think, will we getting that number of people coming in and seeing our live shows? Was that a figure that we're happy with? You know, don't be too hard on yourselves. This is a stressful enough time as it is. So just try and be realistic about the kind of people that you want to reach and how you're going to get there. And yeah, I'm going to pass over to Dom because he can talk a bit more hands-on, like how you're going to reach these people. But as I said, please do reach out in the Q&A and in the chat, and I will be happy to help.
Hello everyone, thank you Sarah. Hello, so I'm Dom. I work for The Space as a marketing and distribution associate, and today I'm going to be really kind of talking more about the distribution side of things. I'm just going to share my screen with you as well. Can we all see that? Is that all okay? So I really kind of want to talk about some of the fundamentals around creating a distribution plan. So, and like Sarah says, I'm going to be using Cypress Avenue as a case study. So this was kind of, this was produced by the Royal Court, and it was originally aired on the BBC in 2019. But we wanted to get the film out to a bigger audience and an international audience. So we decided to release it on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube for World Theatre Day in 2020, which is 27th of March. So I think we'd just gone into the first lockdown into the UK, but we planned it a long time in advance. Yeah, what I'm kind of going to be talking about mainly with regards to distribution, I don't think we're going to have time for talking much about platforms, but I can answer any questions about that later. But it's mainly going to be about the kind of like the cornerstone to what I'm going to be talking about is kind of all the preparation you need to do and like giving yourself enough time. Like Sarah said, like other speakers have said, like distribution is something you should kind of think about at the start of your preparations as well. It's not something you can do just at the end. So what I'm going to kind of look at is really like a couple of things that I do to kind of make the process go as smoothly as possible, and different things to remember. So when I'm working with a company, I want to create a plan that answers certain questions. And so the first lot are, what do I need to prepare? What kind of content? Is the film ready? What copy needs preparing and for when? And secondly, with regards to distribution, you kind of especially want to look at who else is going to help you distribute it. So regardless of what platform it's going to be on, Twitter, Facebook, or anything like that, it's always good to think of what we call partner organizations. So these are just basically any organization, or it might be an influential individual who's going to help you like promote your work and get your work out there. And we're going to look at how they're going to help you as well in like the different ways. So it might be like a mailing list, or they might actually co-host the stream with you as well. So I really kind of hook this around just making 2 documents. Now, the first one, as you can see, it sounds quite simple. It's a timeline. That's basically all it is, but we'll talk a bit more about it in a bit more detail in a bit, and a partner list. So this is basically a massive contact list of everyone who might be able to help you with sharing the work in some way. So here, I don't know if you can see this, it depends on how small your screen is, but I've got a kind of first draft, it's like a snapshot, a screenshot of the very start of my distribution plan with Cypress Avenue. So you can see there, I started it nearly 8 months before we were due to go live. So that was a long time. And we actually, with Cypress Avenue, we had a lot of pauses and like a lot of stops on the way. I'd really recommend obviously it depends on the scale of your online capture and what you're kind of doing, but I definitely you want to give yourself at least 2 months to kind of think about different things and give yourself enough time to do a lot of stuff you might need to do on the way to getting your capture ready for launch kind of thing. Another good place to start, another place to consider, is on receiving the final edit of the film. A lot of what you do distribution wise, a lot of things that can help you get a bigger audience, you can only start preparing for once you have that final edit. So it might be that, you don't want to be in a situation where you receive the final edit within 2 hours of uploading it or something like that. You need a bit of time. The focus of the timeline should obviously be like your launch and like the day it's going to go live. But also you shouldn't just kind of think that that's the main thing. It is very important, obviously, to get everything ready for the launch. But what I'm trying to say is, I think something that often gets overlooked, especially like with aiming for a key date, is that you might have like a whole online period. So it's important that you focus on like marketing the production, the capture, and have prepared to like market it throughout the whole period you've got it online. And that's a good way of it might be that you don't actually get many live viewers, but through word of mouth or other people tagging people in and stuff like that, you build up an audience like that. It's not all just about that first kind of launch. So the end should be like once you've kind of finished the campaign, like once you've done everything. So here just some like random, like not random things, but like things that you should include. So obviously like all deadlines, key dates. Here I've got this kind of nightmare scenario where you think like you've got the final edit on the 9th, but actually it's 20 days later by the time it's actually ready, because it needs to go through a certain series of people before you've got it ready with your subtitles and everything else. So things can take a lot longer than you think, especially when you're working with third parties and other stakeholders. Also, one thing that we're going to come on to in a little bit is contacting potential partners. This is a really big bit of what I do with different companies. It takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of time to kind of keep on top of it as well. One of the best ways we're able to get a lot of viewers for Cypress Avenue was by reaching out to other organizations. Fergus, who we've heard from earlier on, helped me a lot with this, and I recognize a few similar names on the Zoom list as well, of people who we probably contacted a lot throughout February and March last year, asking if you'd like help share the work. This can be like, it might be that you kind of contact 150 people. It all kind of depends on the scale of the work you do. But it can, like I say, it can take a lot of time and explaining different things to different groups of people. So yeah, all the key dates. This, what I was trying to go for here by use it, I mean, like when you're creating this document, I know this is quite I'm saying like, make this document, and this is how like to create the distribution plan. If you find that this kind of document isn't working, then try something else. I think one of the most important things as well is making sure, if you are in charge of the distribution, you're probably going to need some help as well. So whether that is a partner organization or it's somebody else within your team, it's useful to kind of split different responsibilities up. You're no doubt going to be working with someone who might be making you a trailer, or somebody who's filming you something, or you'll have an assistant or your manager who you need to kind of balance things with. It's good to make this document collaborative so you can work out like different delineations and different responsibilities. Yeah, so here, like looking at the example of Cypress Avenue, although we kind of started it a long time, I started the plan a long time in advance, due to like various different delays of different stuff and re-edits. I think we got the final edit about a week before we were due to go live. So Magnus, who we've just heard from, was able to upload the film and do a test. But what happened was, in the test, some music had been edited to the very end and into the end credits. And although the Royal Court had the rights to this music, YouTube put on a preliminary kind of like silencer on it and muted it, and said it would get back to us within 30 days to see whether we had the rights or not, like to confirm we had the rights. Obviously, with a week to go, this was no good. And we were very lucky in that scenario that this music was in the end credits. But if it had been a scenario where the music was over some dialogue or within and YouTube had muted it, then we'd be in a bit of a trickier situation. So it's always good to test the actual file you've got, the final edit, well in advance, as far in advance as possible, even if that is like publishing it to like a private account or something like that, just to check everything will work. I'd also like to talk about supporting content. So like, if you've got stuff like trailers and production photos or like interviews, this is all good, but you've got to remember that the focus of what you're doing is presumably your long form online capture. So make sure, you use and you prepare to use your supporting content well in advance of the film launching. But once the film's launched, what you really want to be doing, especially if you only got on one platform, say YouTube, you want to be kind of getting that YouTube link to as many different people as possible. So it's no good really kind of sharing a link to the trailer or a link to an interview when you've actually got a link to the film. I see this quite often with people sharing press releases and stuff like that. Like, and the press might talk about, or you might have an article on it with the trailer shared, but there's a YouTube link to the entire film, which might as well be in that article. So if you do this all in advance, you can actually have like a link to the film in your press release and stuff like that. We talked a bit about access, and this is another thing that I kind of like comes under a bit of my umbrella with distribution. And with Cypress Avenue, with it being a World Theatre Day launch, we really wanted it to have this kind of international like accessibility. And we wanted to have different subtitles in different languages. in the end, we didn't actually have the budget to do several. So we actually went with getting English access captions, which was great from an access point of view. We also found with quite a few of our partners, they actually preferred English access captions opposed to English subtitles, or no subtitles especially, from a point of view of speaking English as a second language. So even if you might, you can't get Spanish or Arabic or Chinese subtitles, it's always good to say you can offer English access subtitles, and it might be an extra hook to kind of get audiences in or different partners in. But again, to get back to the timeline, this does take a lot of time to do. You can use websites such as rev.com, and I think we mentioned it a bit earlier on as well with doing it DIY on YouTube. This is this is in YouTube Creator Studio, and it just shows how you can kind of do it yourself. So usually within, I think it's around 72 hours, YouTube will create captions for most of its videos, and you can go into it, and if it's slightly, it might be right a lot. I mean, obviously you'd want to kind of check it's all correct and watch it through before promoting that you've got the captions, but you can kind of go in here and it's quite easy to change. Another great thing you can do by doing this on YouTube is you can actually download these subtitles and upload them to Facebook and other platforms. Right, that was a bit of a tangent, but here we go. So the kind of second thing, the second kind of fundamental, I think it's really good to think about well in advance of your production going live, and especially with regards to distribution, is getting as many partners on board as possible. So like I say, this is any organization that can be related to you, would share your work and would be keen to share your work. It's always good to begin close to home. So with Cypress Avenue, we were very lucky in that it had a strong group of co-producers, and it had just been on an international tour as well. And all these venues had a vested interest, obviously, in making sure this film did well, and they wanted to support it. They believed in the work. And so they were really keen and approachable when it came to asking if they could co-host the work and help us at Royal Court and the space promote it. So start really close. If you're thinking where to start with, who's going to promote my film? It might be someone you share the building with, or another organization like that. It could be, start as close as possible. Then what you want to do is kind of build it out a little bit further. So what you then want to look at is any organizations, or it might be groups that have an interest in the film and its themes. So with Royal Court Cypress Avenue, I knew it had been out on the BBC to UK audiences, but I knew that especially because of the film's themes, it would have particular relevance in the Republic of Ireland as well. So, and the wider world, but particularly in Ireland. So we were able to target audiences there and target different partners in the Republic of Ireland as well. It might be that your film is a child-friendly film, or a film for children, in which case you might want to kind of think about targeting parents groups or something like that. It might be a Facebook group, and you approach this Facebook group, which is activities, children's activities during lockdown or something like that. So it's kind of finding where that film that you've got will be relevant to other people. Also doesn't help to think outside the box. With a previous production I worked on, which was a kind of weird dystopian cartoon musical called Golem by 1927 Theatre Company. We had different theatres that helped us promote the work and stuff, but one of the kind of stranger partners was the Jewish Museum in Berlin, and they supported us because they'd actually seen the piece, and they knew that the Golem was based on an ancient Jewish folktale. So they really wanted to show it to their audiences, and to show how this Jewish folktale had come to be this modern production kind of thing. So it always helps to kind of, if you have got a crazy idea, maybe go for it, and it might work well. Another thing could be obviously a hook that would help. Are you doing a fundraiser for something locally, or it might be yourselves? Is there a specific date? Is your production about fatherhood? Would it work to kind of hook it around Father's Day? These are all things that might make another partner say, oh, actually, if you're putting that up for Father's Day, we don't have anything to post on Father's Day, we will post your film as well. Thanks so much. We've now got something to post. So it's kind of thinking where your film might help other people as well. So here we've got a little screenshot of a bit of my potential partner list for Cypress Avenue. This is just like a little bit of it, but I'm just going to go through some of the things I've got on here. So I kind of categorize it because ideally you're going to be dealing with a lot of different people. Like there's no real kind of, one of the tricky things is knowing where to stop with finding potential partners. You could kind of do it up until the launch, even past it, finding new people who might share it. But ideally you want to aim for as many people, relevant people as possible. So here you can see I've categorized it in, so non-Anglophone international theatres, Anglophone theatres, and there might be different categories as well. I think I had specific categories for co-producers, specific categories for, I think we had like different museums and stuff that were interested at one point as well. But the reason, like one of the main reasons for doing this is you're probably going to have different messaging for different categories. Say if you were hosting a film with some museums and some theatres, you'd probably have you might have some different copy for the museums. So it's just an easier way of managing different groups. Also on here, I've got like what's not actually pictured is people's contact names and email addresses. This is obvious, but it's just showing that, you know, like you can contact these people and their contacts are there straight up, like ready for you to use. I put city, country and language in there. This is interesting just to know, but it also helps later on if you want to direct ads to certain locations. So if you know that you've got a majority of like a high audience in Mexico, or it might be South Africa, then you can target ads to there, maybe like in certain towns as well, obviously. Or it might help you if you're thinking about getting particular subtitles for one language. So there, like we've got a majority of different Spanish languages. Also what I've got is reach. It might be that you get to kind of a week before or 2 weeks before, or even like well before, and you know you can only put the stream on one platform. So it might be that you have to kind of go like, oh, actually we've got a much higher reach with all our Facebook partners. Let's not do Twitter. And it's interesting just to see how far your stream might go as well. Here you can see, can you see my mouse? I realize I've been gesticulating with it, but it might not be visible. Good. So here, like another thing I like to do with these lists, I generally use like Google Sheets and Google Docs for a lot of what I do, in that it can be collaborative and you can kind of update it as you go. It's really good, especially if you've got like different people working on different things, just to know where you are at. This is because it can change on a daily basis, or you might get dropped out of emails and stuff like this. And also having like a traffic light system and knowing like what the next step is with that particular contact. One kind of example is that on certain lists, I'll know that I have, I've sent these guys initial copy, but they've not got any media assets yet. That's the kind of next round of information I need to go in. It's just a way of keeping on top of everything. Yeah, this is just like general stuff about what we've been talking about. I'd say I put like 1 month there. It obviously depends on the scale of it, but you really want to kind of start this timeline as early as possible. And like the earlier you start it, the less work you'll have to do week by week. And thinking of partners, sometimes like, I know like me and Sarah have talked about this before, but like we'll go into different organizations and they won't be able to think of partners, but to us, it's obvious. And once you kind of start getting an organization talking about the different partners, it becomes really obvious to them as well. The easiest way is just to start thinking about different people who might help and making a list. And it could be that you get rid of loads, but it's good to start. Obviously you don't want to kind of pivot to a big partner on a particular platform and they don't actually use that platform or anything like that. Do I have time to go into platforms?
I think it would be really useful if you were to summarize quickly, Dom, for people. And then
okay.
we're letting it run on. I'm going to use what would have been breakout time just to pick up with Diego and then to open to the floor. Okay.
So most of what we looked at there was kind of looking at things you should do regardless of your budget. So regardless of like if you've got a big budget or small budget, and regardless of whether you're going to be monetizing your work or not, or you're going to have it behind a paywall or not. The platforms I'm going to quickly go over here, and Anna, please feel free to just stop me when you want, kind of thing. these are more of the like free platforms. So I kind of started there by saying, definitely make sure you want to distribute it online. It could be that we were talking a bit earlier on about some venues in rural Ireland not having good enough kind of bandwidth. It might be that the best way of you contacting your audiences is via DVD. It's like posting a DVD. We did that with a project last year for care homes. So an English theatre company wanted to get its production of Peter Pan into care homes. We looked at live streaming it to them. That was ridiculous because it wasn't feasible. So in the end, we turned around and sent DVDs to all these care homes, and it worked brilliantly. So like, just make sure you, like, online is definitely the right way to go. I always advise, if you kind of like streaming something for the first time and you're doing it yourself, I reckon you want to kind of do multiple. The reason I say like multiple platforms, the reason I say this is in case something goes wrong on one, which it might do, you're able to kind of direct people to another platform. It also kind of gives you a chance to learn more in just one go. Like if you're kind of streaming on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter on your first one, okay, it might be fraught with nerves, but you'll learn so much more than on month one kind of filming, using Facebook as a platform, then 6 months later using YouTube, then 6 months later. Like you learn much more from having the same thing across all three, and you kind of learn which one will be best as well. When I first started doing this talk, YouTube was my favorite platform for streaming. It's now actually moved to IGTV and IG Live. But I still think for established arts organizations that might have a lower Instagram following than they do on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, or know that less people will be able to watch them on Instagram than those three, I still advise going for Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Fergus talked a bit about it earlier on, about using Premiere. I think this is one of the best tools out there for doing free streaming. Sorry, not free streaming, free online capture. The kind of what YouTube Premiere is, it's basically a scheduling tool. It's not anything, it's not like premium or anything like that. All it is a feature in YouTube where you upload a video and you schedule it to post at a time in the future. I think maybe it's up to a week, or maybe it's up to 2 weeks. You schedule it for then, but the advantage you have over just normal scheduling is that you get a link. So you get a link and a landing page, and it'll say, this theatre company is going live on 11th of February at 7 p.m. And you can start sending that link to people. That's really, really useful about it. You can already start distributing that link and kind of get that in front of people's faces. So when you do go live, people have already got it. You can create subtitles using YouTube, as we looked at. YouTube's really accessible in that you don't have to be a member to watch stuff. Like you might have people who aren't members of Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. YouTube's one of the most accessible ones there. You can put it in mailing lists. Sorry, I might be speaking really quick here. You have stuff about, you can put like age restrictions on suggested next videos, and you've also got functionality of it working with smart TVs as well, which is a bit different, as we all know, to like watching something on a phone or a computer screen. It might be that you're creating like family content, you want people to sit around as a family and watch it, something like that. So you can encourage people to watch it there. This is just a bit of Cypress Avenues. I think I won't spend too much time on here because Fergus has already kind of showed us a lot of like all like the relevant stuff on here, I feel. As I said, the negatives of it are the music thing for us. Like that's always a worry and rights. And my only advice against that is, I don't know enough about rights to say either way, but my only advice is just to test things well in advance, and then you can at least know what problems that you're up against, hopefully with enough time to kind of get around them. Facebook, again, is very similar to YouTube Premiere. You can upload in advance. You've got effective audience targeting with ads, and also posting your stream to Facebook groups. Facebook groups are still one of the most engagement friendly things on the internet, in that there's Facebook groups which solely exist because people are interested in, this is obviously, you all know this, but like specific things. If your kind of film directly hits that, then post it to that group, and you're kind of instantly finding your audience. You haven't spent any ad money or anything like that. Cross-posting. This was one of the things that helped us out massively with Cypress Avenue. This is just a way, and I think it's especially great for small to medium and like large arts and organizations as well that have probably got a fairly sizable Facebook following. It's really easy to know how to do once you know how to do it. I like walked through how to do it on this talk, but the problem is Facebook keeps changing so much that the best way to find out how to do it is to Google it and look at the recent articles. Basically what it means is, as an organization, you can upload your video and schedule it to go out at a certain time, and other organizations on Facebook can post that video as well. So they're not sharing it, they're posting that video, but you as the host organization retain all the stats for it, and it grows your audience. It's almost as if it looks like another organization has uploaded it, but you're the one who's uploaded it, and they're almost like sharing it. But it instantly puts you into their audience and into their reach. And it's dead easy to do. So you could kind of cross-post something with 20, 30 different organizations, and all you'd be doing was like uploading one video. But yeah, if you want to learn how to do that, I really recommend having a Google about like most recent articles. This interface has slightly changed now. Twitter. So this is actually my least favorite. I think it's hard to kind of retain audiences to watch something on Twitter, but that's only in my experience. You might be an organization which is particularly active on Twitter and has lots of engagement. It might be great for you to like stream something on there. This works slightly different to how you stream something on, how you do a as live capture or a pre-recorded capture on YouTube and Facebook, in that with Twitter you're actually tricking it into thinking it is live, which can give it a mild boost, but you are kind of tricking the medium as well. As we know, like Twitter is great for discussion. You can pin the tweet with the film in to your profile, so it's like very obvious. I think the cons outweigh it for me. For most organizations, you have to have like some kind of third-party knowledge. Oops, sorry.
Sorry, Dom, sorry to interrupt and apologies.
That's okay.
Can I just come in and just suggest we will post all of your presentation in the chat, and we will send a link to it. So would you just bring in maybe Diego at this point, because we're running
Yes.
very, very close to our sort of finish time. Yeah.
Lovely. So Diego, I was wondering, so I've looked a bit like at the free platforms here and how like distributing, like the distribution plan can be used, whether you're doing kind of free or monetized stuff. I know you've done lots of work with both free models and monetized. I wonder if you could like share your experiences about maybe like the differences or stuff you kind of found comparable with those.
Yes, hi. That's really interesting, Dom, and I think we might have to have a session just with the different platforms.
Thank you.
I think you're still sharing your screen, by the way.
Oh yeah, sorry. How do I?
There you go.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It was a hugely interesting session this morning, and I wish we'd had it a year ago before all of this started. Yes, we've used all of the platforms you described except Twitter. And I would add that additional platforms are, of course, existing TV channels and platforms that are perhaps specific to an art form. So in opera, there is a platform called operavision.eu. It receives funding from the European Union, and they stream opera productions for free. And by far, that has been our most successful platform to use, because it's a industry-specific platform. So people interested in opera would go to it and perhaps find our production by coincidence. Whereas we've also tried the RTE culture platform here in Ireland, and that was less successful. In terms of paid versus free, I think you need to look at everyone is talking about the why we do things, and I think the why informs whether it's going to be paid or whether it's going to be free. So for example, we had our big project, 20 Shots of Opera, which were 20 new commissions of short operas that were made for film. I mean, the why there is we wanted to display the amount of talent that we have here in Ireland, both in terms of composers, but also singers, writers, directors, designers. And so we wanted it to have as wide an audience as possible. And we decided to make it free. Also because we know that selling contemporary opera is really hard. So we knew that we were better off doing it for free. And it's paying off because it's getting huge international attention in the press. So we've had reviews from all over Europe, and including a review in the Wall Street Journal, which we would never have had otherwise. Earlier in 2020, we had two projects. One was called Friday Opera Sessions. It was kind of an informal Friday evening at 5. We would present 5 arias. And because it was meant to be informal, we didn't think it would be appropriate to charge money for it. In July, we had our Seraglio, the mini series. And this was we had to cancel a production of The Abduction from the Seraglio that was due to take place in May. And instead we created a kind of an 8-part mini-series of a reimagined work of the opera. Also because we didn't know exactly how it would turn out, we also decided to make it for free. But in both cases, the Friday Opera Sessions and Seraglio, the mini-series, it really helped with our fundraising effort. So with Seraglio, we had a direct appeal to people that they could join a club called the Abducted Amigos for €25. But also when we talked to our existing supporters to ask them to renew their support for the company, the fact that we were active really, really helped the conversation and really helped drive home the point as to why they should support us. We had 4 live streamed concerts last autumn, and we charged for those because we felt that it was live, it was with full orchestra, and it was unique to us and to Ireland, and that, so we decided to go ahead and charge it. And obviously, charging for a live stream event means that you have a stream of income, which is always good, but also you get to know who your audience is because you know who is attending, and I think the engagement is better. So people who pay obviously for something, they tend to watch from beginning to end, whereas with free online opera, some people might watch half an hour, some people might watch 1 minute. We don't know, but the reach is bigger. So I think we will continue to operate that way and look at whether we charge or not and what platform we use on a case-by-case basis. So it's almost the way I see it is we all know that we have to answer the why. And then I think there is the what, which is what is the artistic work? What is the work you're producing? And then there is the how. How do you distribute it? What platform? Is it free? Do you charge? And I think the why, the what, and the how are all interconnected and overlap. And I think when you get the mix right, then you have a really, hopefully, successful outcome, depending on your own definition of success. And I think it's 11:45, so I will stop now.
Diego, thank you so much. Just before we go to a number of people who've been commenting in the chat, I mean, Dom, the complexities and the new complexities, if you like, that you were describing about, a distribution and a promotional program for a work like Cypress Avenue, it's a new set of complexities. Now, they're probably very different to the ones around putting Cypress Avenue on the Peacock on the lyric stages, all those 4 or 5 years ago. But it's another set of complexities around what was already, sometimes a very challenging situation. But it'd be interesting to hear, from Fergus and from yourself around the complexities for the original production of Cypress Avenue on the Peacock stage versus the complexities for the digital version. But there's so much in this. I might just go quickly because it has been very prevalent in the conversation. Just ask if Pádraig Naughton is available to come in, if he would unmute himself, just around his very generous offer to work with us to make both costings and resources available to make sure that content is accessible. I'm not seeing if Pádraig is still on the call, but or
we
if
can
we
follow
might
up on that, Anna, with the resources that we distribute afterwards as well, because there's been some helpful stuff popped in the chat around that too.
Yeah. While we're waiting for Pádraig, if he is on the call, or if anybody from ADI would like to come in, I might just go to Peter Parr. The whole issue and the whole of mirrors that our rights, whether they be music rights or whatever. And I had a notion when Magnus was talking about the Zoom call audience being represented as the audience. Does every audience member on the Zoom call have to agree to their image being used or their screen being used as part of the production? That the whole thing starts to become so complex and interconnected. But if we can go to you, Peter, just for a comment, because I said a lot of those rights issues, whether it be music or other rights, are all interconnected. Again, I'm not seeing Peter on. Is Peter still on the call? Can anybody?
Anna, I think because it's coming up to 10 to now, we probably might need to close the meeting because we need to click into the next one. Okay.
Well, what we'll do is obviously both and those issues and other issues will be the subject of other events in the future. They do require a huge amount of examination and understanding, which is evident after in the chat this morning. But can I just say thank you again to our speakers and our guests and every one of you for contributing and for making this morning the event that it has been. There's a lot, there's an awful lot to digest and for an awful lot to assimilate. But I think we can take comfort from so many contributions this morning that show how people have done it and done it successfully, and on to everybody following in their footsteps and doing the same again and more. But thank you, and we'll see many of you hopefully in the next session, which is starting in 10 minutes time, and you should have the logins for that. So thank you again, and we'll see you hopefully later in the day or at another event in the future.